I just want to say welcome, everybody. Hi, I'm Mark Parsons. I'm with University of Alabama, Huntsville, and working with NASA on open things. And so welcome to also happy year of open science. I hope you all know that this is the year of open science for the whole federal government. And so we're going to be all about openness in this ESIP meeting. You know, we have open science, we have open doors. And I think I was really in our sort of group therapy session this morning, led by Rebecca. We talked about opening minds, which I think is great. And I'm with this, just a personal anecdote. This year of open science reminds me of the International Polar Year, which was almost 20 years ago now, 15, which was really an opening of a door for my career. And so that was a big thing. And I remember we talked a lot in the International Polar Year about culture change, as we do here in open science. And a historian anthropologist friend who was heavily involved in IPY said, we shouldn't be talking about culture change. Culture change is scary. We don't want to change people's cultures. We want to change their behavior or maybe their mindset. So just keeping that in mind, sort of this open minds as we go forward. That relates to our community participation guidelines, which I hope you all are familiar with, and that were introduced in the opening plenary. Basically, just be decent humans and be respectful. There is a third party you can contact if you feel that people are not being respectful. The session will be recorded, I believe, right? So just be aware of that. And we have ESIP support staff in the form of Susan Shingledecker and Dan and Morgan, who can help with technical issues as they arise. And I think with that, I will turn it over to Cindy. And hope you all see the agenda in Kiko chat with the Google Doc. We'll be following that agenda, and note that there is breakout sessions where we'll be doing some brainstorming towards the end. So stay tuned for that. But meanwhile, we have some initial talks, and I will let Cindy kick us off introducing the Open Science Cluster.
Great. Thank you, Mark. And good day, everyone. I'm excited to be here. I co-host or co-facilitate the ESIP Open Science Cluster, and so really excited about this session. And so on behalf of the Open Science Cluster, we want to thank you for attending. We hope that this is going to be a very productive conversation around the overlap of open science within many of the ESIP clusters, and specifically how information quality plays a critical role. And just to kind of highlight the goals for this session, we really want to gain an improved understanding of open science related activities and needs across the ESIP clusters. We want to gain an improved understanding of how information quality needs vary across the cluster communities, and how this information that we gather today can best be shared among the clusters. We'd like to discuss possible plans for developing more information quality guidance that would help advance open science for one or more cluster communities. And then we would like to discuss plans for further cross-cluster information sharing on issues and activities in open science. And that can be any number of things, whether it's a webinar series or a focused workshop or what have you. And so open science means different things to different communities. And first of all, the Open Science Cluster began by discussing several different definitions that were out there and coming to a consensus on one that we could use throughout our meetings, because you can get derailed talking about what is open science. And so, as you all know, though, about 2 weeks ago, the White House provided a new, slightly different definition. And so just so you know, we may redefine our definition of open science based on that, but that'll come when we meet again and can talk about that new definition. And just to note that we are very excited about this White House announcement, other federal agencies coming on board to participate in the Year of Open Science. So currently we define open science as a collaborative culture that is open, accessible, inclusive, transparent, and reproducible. It expands participation and partnerships beyond the traditional scientific realm and captures the sharing of data, information, knowledge, publications, tools, and frameworks. And all of this with the aim of accelerating scientific research and understanding and amplifying new pathways to science. And so we'd like to kind of suggest that be our definition for today and not discuss what is open science, but rather kind of delve into some more deeper topics. And so I'd like to now turn it over to Jenny Hewson, who is my co-facilitator in this cluster, to talk about what the cluster has been working on and how this session can really inform where we are headed. So over to you, Jenny.
Thanks very much, Cindy, and nice to see a number of familiar faces. So we were, I think we initially formed kind of in the early spring of last year, really as a recognition of the increase in momentum around open science. We spent 3 or 4, probably 3 telecons discussing what was important to the different cluster members around open science. We then held this session at the ESIP summer meeting last year, which I think was quite instrumental for us. We aim to introduce the cluster first of all. We also then aim to provide some context around open science in terms of a number of lightning talks to showcase different open science initiatives. And we really use these to highlight kind of why the initiatives were evolving, what gap or need they were filling, why they'd thrived, what some of the barriers could have been, but also to highlight a top trend in terms of an emerging trend within open science. And these then provided this this background for this interactive session within the ESIP community at the summer meeting to really brainstorm, to get the community fodder in terms of what were the emerging trends that different practitioners were seeing in open science. And from that, we identified these 4 kind of overarching trends in terms of social factors, another trend capturing stakeholders, another focused on tools and collaboration, and then another one related to outputs and whether these trends were increasing, decreasing, etc. I think that process also highlighted a couple of other elements in terms of overlap or potential linkages with other ESIP clusters in terms of how they were tackling different themes in open science. And from that, we held a number of conversations with different clusters, the disasters lifecycle cluster, the information quality cluster, the community resilience cluster, and also the marine data cluster. And during those conversations, we again shared these different, the 4 overarching themes, and I really asked them to consider kind of what resonated with them, if there were areas that they were working on, if there were opportunities, if there were gaps, etc. And really that then drove the idea for this session around open science and information quality broadly across ESIP. And then just a couple of points on how we feel.
Can you wrap up pretty quick, Jenny?
Yeah, this session could inform future activities. First of all, by providing this opportunity to collaborate on the theme of information quality, and also to inform a webinar series that the Open Science Cluster is developing to increase awareness around open science. And I will pass it back to you, Mark.
Thanks, Jenny. Yeah, so as Jenny said, the focus today is really on what the overlap with information quality, but we see a lot of overlaps with this cluster with a lot of sessions, and that's why we want to clusters that we want to try and tease out and highlight. But for now, I would like to turn it over to Gay Peng, also from UAH, to introduce us to the information quality cluster.
Thank you. So that was very nice background setting, and sharing slideshow. On behalf of the acoustical chairs, and I'd like to thank OSC co-chairs and for this joint session. And my name is Ge Peng. As Mark has mentioned, I'm with University of Alabama and Huntsville. And today I would like to provide a quick introduction to ESIP information quality cluster. So the cluster was reinitiated in summer 2015. It was in hibernation for a number of years. And currently we have cross-domain agency data professionals. And we also collaborate, we come together to collaborate and to address common data and information quality challenges. And the IQC is closely connected to the ESIP Data Stewardship Committee. We consider it under DSC. And the vision of IQC is to become a authoritative and responsive information sources, especially on data quality standards and best practice in earth science community. We doing so by facilitating the sharing of experience and community leading practices. So along in that area, we'll collaborate nationally and internationally with various different groups. I'll talk a little bit more about it later. And we also invite speakers to provide their perspective for our monthly telecoms. And we're always looking for speakers. We host sessions or provide presentations at a number of conferences, include AGU, EGU, of course, ESIP. We always have a session for summer and winter sessions. In the next 2 slides, I'm going to highlight several works and outcomes coming out of the IQC work. And most of the work are done to address community needs. And we have a paper published in 2016 that's to define the rules and responsibilities, primarily because at the time, the question was, who is responsible to generate the metadata? Is it data producer's responsibility, or is metadata specialist responsibility, and how the knowledge needs to be integrated across different domains. And the second one comes out the challenge that when you are talking about qualities, and when you look at the metadata quality, that's quality. And when you look at the scientific accuracy precision of the data itself, that's another quality. And then we serve them, that's also aspect quality. Then people get really confused. So we have this paper come out, define the 4 different aspects of data set quality. And the next one is to address challenge of what's the best approach to capture data uncertainties and to document them. So this is one of the first paper that led by Moroni, one of the co-chairs, to understand the different various perspective of the data uncertainty in earth science observation data. And we also work to support open science. And here are 3 papers that's to promote sharing the data and quality information in various different perspectives. And the 2021 led by Bob, that's perspective on citizen science. And then there's 2 other papers that I have leading is to have an official call for global sharing of quality information. And we have developed the guidelines to help the community. There are practical guidelines and with examples to help community to document them and sharing them. And then they touch on a number of the open science aspect Cindy and Jenny has mentioned, including the transparency by making data available and establish trustworthiness by having that quality information available. And then we also have extensive collaboration with the national and internationals. And I have a list of different organizations, co-chaired and as well as IQC members, collaborating with them fairly extensively. And the AERDC has a poster on 4 years collaboration between us. And that's the Wednesday. And if you're interested in learn more, please to take a look at that poster. And I'm not going to go through detail because of the time. However, I do want to highlight that we collaborate with other ESIP cluster on various different sessions. And we did one with the usability cluster. We also had it in the past with the disaster cluster. And this one, we are collaborating with Open Science Cluster. I'm looking forward to the breakout session and learn more about what does the information quality means to your cluster. So ongoing and future work, we will continue to share knowledge and we'll continue to collaborate with other clusters, national, international. And at the same time, we are trying to think to establish RDA working group, and that really having to do a lot with organization support. And on the IQC level, we also plan to work with the International Precipitation Working Group there to develop a global validation network. And we've been trying to do the uncertainty follow-on papers. And again, it's a matter of how much effort and how much work on our plate. So the as any ESIP clusters, information quality cluster membership is open, and I have a link here. We are always looking for people to join our session. And if you have any question or new ideas, feel free to contact all the co-chairs. I have listed all the information names, and including former co-chairs, Rama, who has been participating with the cluster fairly extensively. I think that's all. Yes.
Great, thank you very much, Peng. And you've got us back on time. And just so everybody knows, we're not really going to have Q&A on this, but I'm sure all the speakers would be happy for you to follow up with them in the social networking session later, or in chat, or however. So with that, that was the introduction from your two host clusters. Now we're going to hear from some other clusters on their perspectives on information quality and openness, starting with Zach Robbins from the Community Resilience Cluster. Take it away.
Thank you so much. Sorry, I got two computers going at the same time. I want to say thanks to everybody who presented before. I think it was really cool and exciting to see how much this work that these two clusters are doing aligns with what we're doing in community resilience. It's always hard to make all the cluster meetings at the same time, but I hope that this will reflect a lot of the things that were talked about there. I'm Zachary Robbins. This presentation is done along with the entirety of the ESIP Community Resilience Cluster. Some of the main people involved with that are listed there as well. I picked this picture. This is near my house. It was a fun hiking picture. Those are always nice. But also, it really represents kind of what we're trying to address at the Community Resilience Cluster. So we have kind of the domain of the earth science there on the left, nature, rock formations. Then we have the city of Albuquerque, and they're kind of stretching into one another. And that's really what we think about in the Community Resilience Cluster. We feel like thinking about community resilience allows earth scientists to really reflect on who it is they serve with their science, and what structures in society and science and historical disparities kind of affect the ability to provide that in the way we want and how to overcome those challenges. So I'll start with a little bit of definition. Obviously, both the words community and resilience can have a lot of different meanings. So in order to put them in context, we define communities as geopolitical units, social groupings. This could be anything from, thinking about structured government to church groups, community groups, groups of people that just live in the same place and interact with one another. And then when we think about resilience, what we think about is the capacity of a system to prevent, adapt, and recover from various shocks and stressors, not just from the natural world, but economically, so that they are ultimately able to grow stronger and be more prepared in the future. As I said before, this is all part of the Community Resilience Cluster. We meet every third Thursday at 2 if you're interested in addressing some of these topics. So what do we think about as the community resilience context for open data? Obviously, there are various different groups we classify as communities, but it's can they use information, data, knowledge, or wisdom to build capacity to the growing suite of different environmental problems. Beyond that, we think this capacity building is really important. As we saw with the COVID-19 pandemic, the ability to have information, even for problems that you don't know may be coming, or to build up structures and infrastructure really is important as things change rapidly in the future. Additionally, we think of this from the perspective of decision makers. There are lots of different decision makers, and they're often not consulting an entire scientific panel, right? They're just practitioners in a given area, city planners or other types of planners, industry leaders, or just the general public. And they may seek or not seek scientific data and information, but they're making decisions based off information to make actions ultimately. So it's not necessarily about just building the knowledge base, but how that knowledge base can be used to really make action in the future. I give a couple examples of this here. I'm not going to go through each of these, but we have these different geopolitical units, right? And one of the things the Community Resilience Cluster wants to do is understand how each of these groups has different needs when it comes to open science and the type of data and information they need. You can think of individuals, maybe homeowners or people who live in an area trying to plan evacuation routes or making choices about sheltering in place. They have one specific type of data need. If we think about city planners at a much larger scale, they're going to have totally different needs. They're going to want to plan long-term infrastructure that increases their resilience to things like climate or natural disasters. And so their data needs are going to be much different. And then you have like large-scale efforts at the region or nation. Think about recovery efforts in the Gulf Coast or the Chesapeake Bay. They're really interested in long-term planning and trajectories. Their data needs might align more with what is commonly done in earth sciences, thinking about these sort of long trajectories and how to monitor and implement them. Sorry, I got my screen sharing thing in the way. One of the things we really think about with informational quality when we think about these different hierarchies is the relevance of data. So data used by communities often is used post hoc, right? They're not putting together a scientific team. They're just drawing on what is readily available for them. And often, by the way that science is structured and conducted, these products are too vast, either spatially or temporally, meaning they're looking too far in the future or they're covering all of the United States at one time. And this really has implications to how that science informs decision making. And communities and industries have really different needs from what most scientists study. I use this figure here from Dunn et al. This is about wineries and the type of climate and weather information they need. And this survey kind of looked at, people are providing a lot of multi-decadal to century scale information on climate, when these winemakers really have to understand interannual, annual, or shorter timeframes, and that data is not readily available to them. And if they're making decisions only on one scale, it might ultimately change their ability to be resilient. I show some work here, or an example from our work as well. These are climate projections from 2080 to 2100. And if you were a person who lived in the Sierra Nevada and you really wanted to understand how precipitation might change over time, each of these gives you a different understanding of how that would work. This is all from one climate model, even though there's many climate models and they all predict different things. But a lot of times the data that's regularly available is drawn from raw GCMs or coarse downscalings. As we can see, if we look at this area here in the Sierra Nevada, if you were to plan off one of these data sets, you might come up with a totally different understanding of what you need to adapt to in the future. In this case, maybe thinking there would be less precipitation when downscaled fine scale models actually show there'd be more. To this point, often these data sets are in the domain of people with a lot of infrastructure and processing capability. So it's really important that data is labeled and understood for appropriate purpose and also available at scales that people can use. Another important thing, obviously, is provenance, right? And provenance within the context of decision makers is that decision makers are really rapidly responding to evolving information context. So they need to consider what the sources are, and they don't have a whole time to do a research review. Furthermore, trust and reliability is often built through time. It's not just a certification, it's showing that something can be reliably used. And that has been shown in studies to be really crucial for ultimate data utility. Another aspect of this that we think about in the community resilience thank you, is ethics. A lot of times the data availability and data protection reflects a lot of the inequities in society. And most data sources don't consider ethics in the data creation and data dissemination. And as is illustrated in this figure from Cinnamon, a lot of times that will mirror the increasing capital hierarchy, right? So having data that also considers ethical implication and having that quality available is really important for data equity in society. And lastly, the most important aspect is access. Sorry, my picture's a little pixelated here. But the question is, if you build it better, will they come, right? Can we just build the perfect machine that gives people data access? And a lot of people have shown, and people are understanding this still, but that communities and decision makers communicate through networks of data utility. So rather than just presenting something out there, we need to ultimately change how we do science to build these community networks that allow people to understand and trust and utilize data. And ultimately, we have to show that the data is of utility to the community, not just put it out there and have them find that. One way that this can be done is through co-creation, building things together to build trust with the results directly with the people who will communicate it. If you're interested in this, we wrote a paper on a lot of these topics, or you can join our monthly meetings. Thank you all for inviting me.
Thank you, Zachary. That was excellent. Thank you for bringing in the ethical dimension. It's definitely something we need to grapple with. So without further ado, though, I think I will pass it now to Dave Jones to talk to us about the disaster and wildfire clusters.
Great, thanks, Mark. I'm going to share my PowerPoint here. Good afternoon, everybody, if you're on the East Coast, and almost afternoon if you're on the West Coast. I'm Dave Jones. I'm the co-chair of the Disaster Lifecycle Cluster, along with Karen Moe. We're going to be meeting at the end of the week on the future of the Disaster Lifecycle Cluster. So we're going to be changing things up a little bit. So hopefully you can come and participate with us and help us determine a pathway forward. And I'm also the incoming new co-chair for the wildfire cluster, which is launching on Thursday here at ESIP. So we're really excited about that. Douglas Rao is the co-chair with me in the wildfire cluster. So information quality and open science to us is critical. I first want to jump back a little bit and just tell everybody what we've done in the disaster lifecycle cluster, with kind of harnessing this big idea of not just collaborating with ESIP clusters, but how can we get access to data services that are trusted and deliver those data services into decision-making environments. And it's really incredible, some of the experiences we've had over the last 3-4 years when you get into decision-making environments. Most people, particularly analysts that use data and access data, spend 80% of their time just looking for data. 80% of their time. That means they're only spending maybe 10%, 15% of their time once they get the data in actually using it to make their decisions to drive action. And so we have looked into various areas like the Ag and Climate Cluster, Drone Cluster, Air Quality Cluster, Discovery Cluster. How can we put the brain trust of ESIP to work? Why are we doing this? Because the big idea is within the disaster lifecycle cluster, we worked very closely with the All Hazards Consortium. They have 45,000 members around the country, mainly emergency managers at the state level, the food, fuel, transportation, communication, medical supply, logistics companies, utilities that have to use data. And just like Zachary was talking about, they have to, they look at data and they make these 30-second decisions. And these 30-second decisions could be million-dollar decisions. They don't have time to go back and look at where the data came from. And that's the problem. Some of the data that could get into their decision stream may come from untrusted sources or, just non-professionals. So we came up with the operational readiness levels within ESIP, within the disaster lifecycle cluster, worked with the All Hazards Consortium, and now decision makers are using operational readiness levels to have more confidence and trust in the data that they access. It has a process that you go through to answer questions about the data, how it's stored, how it's curated, how it's offered. And then it pops out an ORL number. This is a living, breathing thing. So it's going to evolve as we get more input and work with more partners. But this is an example. ORL 1, most trusted and reliable, timely data can drive decisions, like identifying hotspots from wildfires and then sending a smoke jump team out there in response. All the way to ORL 4, which is not very timely, but it still could be useful in the decision-making process. It's sound science, but it just might not be timely enough for decisions that you have to make. And so the ORL process and these numbers here are a big success for ESIP. Bringing that out, and now DHS and FEMA are looking at it very closely to see how they can apply it into their practice. This is looking back at the 2020, remember when we were actually in person before the pandemic, where we were talking about this approach and the big idea. But what we also did is we had an adjacent meeting in one of the rooms next door with emergency managers and utilities to ask them, how do they use data? How do they access it? And how do they put it into their decision-making processes? And this quote from Tom Moran, he says it all: the sharing of trusted information drives decision-making and shortens response time. Data can support community lifelines efficiently when it has an associated ORL number to it. So we're making great inroads. We also had a session at ESIP on California burning, putting data to work. And this is interesting. On the right-hand side, we asked a question and created a mind map. What is trusted data? Well-documented, validated, timely, and available. There's all sorts of great input there for trusted data. Now, when we talk about open science, for us, we're talking about open, trusted science, not that everybody can just report whatever they want to if you're looking at field work or observations from the field or whatever. But we're really looking to marry the trusted information providers, those trusted sources of information, and deliver it through that last mile. That last mile is very difficult because it has to go into the hands of non-technical decision makers who have to look at the data and make decisions. So over the last couple years, we've been looking at not only the ORLs, which we think that this could really be a great pathway to accelerating research to operations, but ORLs provide this confirmation to non-technical decision makers that the data is trusted and credible. And so what we look at open science about is that it can lead, and I think ESIP is in the perfect position here to lead through best practices, so it can result in trusted data. So I think, you know, I see in the future, as we put, you know, more meat on the bones for addressing operational readiness levels, that open science and open data play a role in that. And I think we need to expand and accelerate our reach into data sources that are being offered. And that's one of the things that we hope to do within in the wildfire cluster, and in the future in the disaster lifecycle cluster, is how can we really take advantage of the discovery process to look at data sets and then put them in front of decision makers and get their feedback. Is this valuable? Is this helpful? And we're not going to put data sets in front of them that are not trusted, that don't have the fair connotation with it, so it's easily findable and accessible and reusable, and also across platforms. It has to be interoperable. So we're really hoping that the open science cluster within the ESIP can be something that we can always look at and look toward for best practices for open science. So what are some of the needs and the gaps? This is my last slide. We need to serve more underserved communities, right? I mean, it's not just because we have the J40 initiative and everything going on, but there are a lot of people that are losing their lives because they don't have access to the right information at the right time. And language is critical. You know, we publish everything from severe weather warnings and alerts in English. They're starting to be done in Spanish in certain areas. But there's a lot more languages going on in communities around the country. I did some work with the Redmond Emergency Operations Center in Washington State. 17 different languages just in Redmond, Washington, that they really had to try to communicate with. So on-the-fly language translation for weather and actionable information, not just in bulletins that go out or across like NOAA Weather Radio, but in the data services that are coming from data providers. So we can flip a switch or do a drop-down menu and click, you know, Farsi, and it comes down and translates all the language appropriately. And that means probably spending some special time on particular terms like tornado warning, tornado watch, storm surge watch. What does that mean in all those languages? And make sure that we're really communicating those impacts. And then we also need to address some color options for GIS products, because we do have there's a color vision deficiency in groups out there where they cannot distinguish between different colors. So how do we address that? All that because open science and open data can lead towards these best practices in coming into serving these communities. So we're really excited about the wildfire cluster that's going to be launching. That's going to be on Thursday at 1:30 in the afternoon. Hope you all can join us as we chart our course there. And then on Friday, the disaster lifecycle cluster is going to finish up our 3-year wildfire work, which has justified the launching of a wildfire cluster, and then see what directions we want to go there. But open science and open data are playing critical roles in everything that we do. So thanks.
Excellent. Thank you, Dave. Already seeing some cross-cutting themes with what you presented and what Zachary presented. Love the idea that it's open, trusted science. You know, I don't think that gets really incorporated in those definitions that Cindy was talking about at the beginning. Okay, our last speaker or speakers is Karen Moe and Colleen Rosales will be telling us about the air quality cluster and their perspective.
Yeah, so let me bring up my charts. I will be brief. And we are looking at, let me see, take a couple steps here, slideshow. There we go. So the air quality cluster has started a new activity to develop a community air quality toolkit. So we're kind of addressing, and Steve Young is here. I noticed he chairs that cluster, and we have been using work that I've been doing with my community, which has a number of environmental and economic challenges, an overburdened community when we talk about economic and environmental justice. So especially neighborhoods surrounding the community. And the community has been very involved with air quality issues, which I'll show you in just a moment. But so I'm going to be talking a little bit about our needs and how we're using my community and my understanding of the community needs to move forward with this new activity of coming up with air quality toolkit for communities like mine, which I think my community is very typical of many throughout the country. And Colleen Rosales from OpenAQ has joined our ESIP cluster, and she'll be talking about that focus of open data. And so a couple of years ago, I worked in my community with the University of Maryland to develop this hyperlocal air quality sensor network using purple air sensors. So we have a lot of good data coming in for PM2 data, PM2 status. And our data set goes back a couple of years. And it's used by the state of Maryland, the Maryland Department of Environment, and they've initiated this targeted inspection initiative. So that's all well and good. And in fact, Chevrolet is part of an EPA grant that has been awarded to MDE to be kind of a test bed for further exploration of air quality in overburdened neighborhoods in the state of Maryland. Then last summer, we got an ESIP funding Friday, and our former ESIP fellow, Dr. Tian Wang, created this start of a toolkit foundation, a community air quality monitoring dashboard. I took the session yesterday to talk about how do I describe my project, addressing community, my targeted community. And so this is my first cut at it. So I think we'll be working on this with the air quality cluster, but we're basically looking at the dashboard and eventually the toolkit to help community members. In this case, I'm focusing a lot on our managers and volunteers. What do they want to do? What's their problem? They want to protect their health and environment from air pollution. I really think my loss of voice this winter is because of where I live here. But that aside, we want to help people access and use actionable air quality information to influence those decision makers. In this case, it's going to be really at the county level, sometimes at the state level, regarding proposed development efforts. And the reason why that's interesting, both to the state of Maryland for having us join their EPA study this year, is because of where we live And the types of environmental pressures, a lot of it has to do with traffic, but our town here in Greene is surrounded by industrial areas that are zoned industrial. And there's a fair amount of heavy industry in the neighborhood. There's also a lot of what they call warehousing activities. And one area that we're kind of interested in is that the neighboring District of Columbia has a 10-acre plot of land they've purchased to install a bus depot outside of the city in our neighborhood for about 100 circulator buses that would run in the district. So, this kind of development comes to our town. The town gets an opportunity to respond and say, hey, we've got an environmental burden. And so I've been working with my community to say, what kinds of questions do you have? And I'm not going to go over this in detail, but there's a big issue about idling trucks and buses and what it does to the air quality because of these warehouses and the like. Can we, we're really trying to influence the district to only use their purchased new depot, which hasn't been built yet, for electric buses. That would at least relieve some of these pressures. And people want to know about the health impact from smoke. We've got a recycling facility which does create some smoke hazards on occasion. And what's that impact on us? This was a second meeting that I had last fall. What constitutes a community air quality baseline data set? One of the things that we've been told in the community is that in order for us to say that we have an environmental burden, we want to be able to prove it. And so data, I think, would be really helpful for this. And our local data set of ground-based data needs some processing in order to help address this question.
2 minutes, Karen.
Okay. And so anyway, let me go ahead and pass it over to Colleen for a couple of comments then about her work with air quality and open air quality.
Thanks, Karen. So at OpenAQ, we're a nonprofit aiming to fight air inequality through open data. We became an ESIP partner last year, and we're always excited to get involved in various air quality initiatives and spark collaborations within and from the ESIP air quality cluster. And so what OpenAQ is we're a platform that aggregates disparate air quality data sources from all over the world. We harmonize and standardize this in our platform and then make that available, like publicly available, freely available for everyone to use by different types of users. Next, please, Karen. So this is just an example of, what data sources that we gather, as well as the types of pollutants that we have in the platform and the types of data products that we have. So there's programmatic, there's the website, which this week you'll see the revamp of the website. But basically we have all these like publicly accessible air quality data. Next, please. And so some examples, and I realize I don't have much time to go through all of these, are just to say that we enable a lot of many different types of uses. As an example is an air pollution bot, which you can chat with and then see what are the hazard levels outside, and it will also tell you what actions you can take to avoid the air pollution outside. We've also been used in journalism. Next, please. And then also in areas where there is not a lot of air quality monitoring. And so data within OpenAQ has been used to for machine learning models for such areas. Next, please. And then I think the most important, what open science needs or gaps that we can address with OpenAQ is that, the shared tools and shared data platform at OpenAQ can address time and cost savings as well as peer-to-peer learning, which will spark, increased environmental justice analysis and action as well as advocacy. And so the tool is going to be launched this week, so we're very excited for that. The website already has a very new look and feel to it, but the Explorer tool and the revised platform would be kind of a way to address the gap between non-technical and technical users for air quality data. Next, please. And so to learn more about OpenAQ and how we can help in terms of not just within the air quality cluster and within open science, but outside of that as well, we'll be present all throughout the week in these different sessions that I listed here and as well on the social media channels. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Colleen. That was great. Well, I don't love, but the nice turn of phrase with air inequality. Inequality is poor quality. So I think that's nice. Okay, so the idea now is that we are going to go into breakouts. You are going to all be just randomly dumped into breakouts. I put a link in the chat that is a Jamboard, and each breakout will just take a tab within the Jamboard and use that for your brainstorming. And really, we just want to hear from your communities. We've heard from 3 communities now, which obviously have a lot of commonalities, but differences as well, on what issues of quality are you grappling with and what's important to your community, particularly from this perspective of trust and openness. See if you can't then identify some themes across those, and then come back and give a short report out, because again, the open science cluster and the information quality cluster are looking for ways that we can foster greater collaboration around certain themes within ESIP. So any quick questions of clarification? I know we're cutting it close on time, but before we're all yanked away, any final questions? Okay, Dan, I think you can lead us into the breakout groups.
They're pre-assigned. We got 8 per room, so it works out.
Sweet. Hey, welcome back, everybody. After being unceremoniously ripped out of your breakouts, I'm sure you were in the midst of intense conversation. That's usually the way it works. We only have 15 minutes. And I believe, how many breakouts did we have, Dan?
We had 6 altogether.
Oh, okay. We had fewer than I thought. Okay, good. So that gives us roughly 2 minutes each to report out. Just all I'm looking for is, if you had any aha moments, you noticed any cross-cutting themes, something that could be pursued further. Maybe I'll just model it. I'll try and report out from our group. We were group 3. If you want to go to that particular tab, that would be tab 4 of the Jamboard. Sorry that I wasn't clear about which Jamboard to use. I think we got a little confused on that, but a couple themes emerged. Some were, I think were fairly obvious, like the need for well-organized metadata and having good captures of measurement uncertainty. But one that I think we talked a bit more about was the notion of it comes from a place of trust. You trust either the repository it came from, the data provider it came from, but what dictates what makes it a trusted lab or a trusted repository or a trusted data provider is very contextual, based on your own personal knowledge in many cases. And so how to capture that, I think, is going to be an interesting challenge. What is a trusted authority? And the answer is it depends. So somewhat related to that was trying to avoid misuse. And I think sometimes that can be a red herring. People fear misuse when it's actually creative use. But you definitely don't want to have people misusing things. And so providing examples, providing of how it can be used, providing example codes, notebooks, etc., and really providing more context around that. So those were like two major themes that I saw. I'm sure that the other people in my group would have more to add, but given our limited amount of time, I think I will pass it to another group. Why don't we go back to group one, whoever that was.
Group one included Andy Barrett, Cindy Hall, Dan, Peng, Nancy, Chin. Anybody from that group?
Yeah, I can give a quick report out. So we used the example slides, and sorry for that. We wasn't so sure. So we just started, and we'll probably copy it over to the group one. So if you go back to the first one, and there are a couple of things jump out. One is the fitness for purpose. There is the timeliness of the data, and the resolution of the data, and the location relevancy. And the other part is about the capture the quality information, including data sources, and you make them transparent. And then also the having a standard way of capture that quality information. And in addition to those, there are several other points I thought that also very important and interesting, including the metadata and the definition of terms and ethnic collection of the data. And other members in the group feel free to add if you feel like other point you like should be mentioned.
Okay, well, maybe we'll go to group two. Who would like to report for group two?
That will be me. This is Denise. We had some really great discussion. Some of the things I think that maybe we touched upon that hasn't already been spoken is that there are very definitely broad themes around provenance and quality, but and persistence and accessibility, but that there may be specific ways that it needs to be implemented depending on the community. One of the things that we started talking about, related to ethics and trust, is there is the discussion about fitness for purpose, but one of the things that we started talking about was about you have the data, the quality of the data itself, but then you have the quality of the knowledge extracted from that data and ways to communicate that in ways that are valuable. Particularly to maybe lay people or non-domain scientists. But yeah, kind of our general things that there were sub themes that came up in different communities, but I think pretty much everything was cross-cutting in some way or another. What did I miss? I feel like I missed one big thing.
Yes, it was perfect. Although
right,
I would like to follow up, actually. I don't get what you mean by the quality of knowledge extracted from the data itself.
Well, I'm going to ask. Well, so I'm going to ask David to explain it because he had some really good words on that, and I don't think I captured it well in the stick it note. So David.
Yeah. So yes, for sure. This is probably a neglected topic that the information quality cluster probably has a lot of foundation in, but we haven't really put a lot of emphasis in it because most of our target audience has been people of a certain technical expertise or a technical background that once they have access to the data set quality or the data file quality attributes, they can pretty much run with it. So this recommendation is coming from a more from the perspective of a community who doesn't have that technical expertise. All they see are the knowledge statements that are expressed as a byproduct of the data sets, but because they lack the domain expertise or the technical expertise, they don't really have a reliable way that I can perceive to associate quality to those statements or to the knowledge. So if there was some kind of a standardized approach to doing that, to give them that level of confidence, it gets back to kind of trustworthy repositories as an example. So there's like that core trust seal where somebody can go in and just reliably trust that, you know, well, what's coming from that repository is going to be generally trustworthy and reliable. Something to that effect, you know, could be a good start to that. And Doug mentioned that there was a report that's already been done with regard to provenance. Doug can probably speak more about that, but we identified provenance solutions that could probably help with some of this as well.
It's more the NSF open knowledge network. They have a sprint and then they generate reports. Provenance is had a big discussion in their report as well, and several different use cases from social environmental justice to other parts that NSF may be interested in.
Okay.
Yeah. And kind of building on that, kind of the reliability and trustworthiness of the data presentation, the data interface itself, not just like as Steve pointed out in chat, you know, we all know of cases of people cherry picking data.
Right.
So.
Okay, that helps a lot. Yeah, there's a lot to unpack there. And I think that relates again to that trusted authority notion. But we need to move on. Group 4.
Awesome. I will go for that. I will just try to go over the new things. So we did the general, we have the trust and fitness of use section, kind of stuff about accessibility and discoverability of data, and how to get information to local neighborhoods, and how to get the data observations needed to actually answer communities' questions. We then mostly talked about kind of a spectrum between legal and management issues and standards issues, with provenance information kind of being that in-between connector. Yeah, there was a lot of talk of just about how the kind of, what I would say, like the power dynamics behind who collects data and having that be transparent. It often, I think we were talking about air quality data, and someone can jump in if they want, and having it be actually collected by corporations who have the money rather than say government organizations. And then we just started talking about kind of quality control tests and standards for different types of data, and whether those can be made to be more interoperable and accessible themselves, because right now they are often siloed and not discoverable and findable. So those are the general things, and if anyone has anything to add, jump in.
Okay, great. Well, thank you very much. That was nicely done. I like your crediting people up in the upper right. That was very good. It's good to know where these things came from, because there's obviously a lot to digest out of all this, and the legal issues is something I hadn't really thought about at all. So that's interesting. Let us go to group 5.
I think that's my group.
Okay.
So, and we talk a lot about data quality related challenges. First, data sources are very diverse, including public, commercial, and citizen science, for example. So data integration, including data quality, can be challenging, especially for operations. So for example, some commercial data, you can do that, use the data to do the research, but not the operation. You have to pay for that, for example. Yeah, that's one of the challenges. So data quality information need to be published, openly available, and standardized. And we have seen the weather forecast community, they developed their own, algorithms for data quality. Yeah, whether or not that kind of algorithm can be extended to other domains. So we don't know yet. So, and let's see. Yeah, also some people mentioned data in different formats, and also a new system from like a GPL, a cloud-based, how the data will data access, including egress, and also we are in the hybrid situation, cloud and on-prem. People, how can we shift the people from from cloud from on-prem based to cloud based? That can be another challenge. So uncertainty quantification for products, that's very essential, for using products. And benchmarking is also very important. So we have see a lot of versions of data products. We users need to see some kind of benchmarking. How the quality information have been improved over the years. And that information mostly is missing. It's just like a weather forecast. Right now 10 days forecast is much better than before. We need that kind of metrics. And also the data quality information communication outside your own community. You have used a different terminology. Things like that. So I think that's all I have. So anybody has any more information, feel free to add. Thank you.
Thanks, Sean. Yeah, that's another sort of interesting thing that we hadn't really thought about. I don't think is how being in the cloud versus being on-prem is going to affect people's perception of the quality of the data. I think that's going to take some further exploration. Okay, we are very low on time, but let's make sure we get here from our last group, Group 6.
Yeah, thank you very much. We had an exciting group. Zach, Tim, and Zoe were all giving great contributions. We were talking about the sources of the data, relevance of the data, measurement of the data, and some of these issues, for instance, were contradictions between the providing source and the authority, or the tension between operational readiness and ongoing use, such as data not being integratable with decision support tools, timeliness, slow delivery of data products to support decision-making and new products not vetted, limited products built on core data products that we might be wanting to use, and then compatibility issues in terms of proprietary data, and longevity and relevance of data and information to the information need, and README files, and such as documentation and metadata. Also, we need these, and we need at least the bare minimum done, but who will do it? So those are the ideas quickly.
Very well done, Bob. Any final comments from that group? Okay, I gave myself 5 minutes, but we don't have 5 minutes. I was going to somehow synthesize all this into something brilliant. That is beyond my ability. I will note that the Open Science Cluster meets on the 4th Tuesdays at noon Eastern, and we would love you all to join us, because I think you've given us a rich, a bunch of information to sort of parse through. There's this issue of trust and these dimensions of trust and the scale of trust, temporal and spatial, if you will, or community level layers of trust. Obviously, there's a lot that needs to be unpacked there, and I think if we could document that better or clarify that better, that would be super helpful. And that also relates really much to the context. Where you trust what you believe in comes from a context. And so, like I said, you've given us a whole lot to think about. Please join our group. We will be trying to digest this perhaps at our next meeting. I would like to give Jenny and Cindy and Peng an opportunity for any last comments or thoughts before we wrap up.
From me, Mark, thanks ever so much. Another really fascinating session. A lot more information to work with, and I think we will digest it going forward. And I put the link to the Open Science Cluster in the chat.
Yeah, I would like to thank IC leading this session, and everybody for participating. And I definitely see a lot of overlapping and a lot of needs and challenges for both clusters going forward to help address and collaborating with the ESIP community.
Great. Thanks again. I know we've gone a couple minutes over. I really appreciate everybody's active engagement. It was a helpful session.
Next up,
You,
everybody, we have a networking coffee break in Wonder. So you can access that through Kiko Chat. Take a quick break if you need it, but then come back. If you click on the coffee break and then click on the actual cup of coffee, I believe, it will take you into the Wonder platform. This first coffee break, we're focusing on getting to know the new ESIP community fellows. You guys were lucky here. You had Morgan and Dan in this session, but come on over and meet them and other early career professionals, especially. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.
Thanks,
Ciao.
everyone.
Thank you. Bye, everybody.
Thank you. Bye-bye.